Greetings from the IES Residential Education Center. I'm George Tidden. Today's lesson will be learning about the National Electric Code Book. NEC is used in our everyday installations and is important to your career path. We will learn the layout and how to look up codes. The more you use the book, the easier it'll get. The National Electric Code and how to use it. 2020 NEC Nfpa 70 Code Book. The code book is made by Nfpa, National Fire Protection Association, and it's number 70. They have over 200 code books, and we're number 70 out of that. So electrical is 70, and they have many of them for plumbing, for AC, for different types of fire protection, for several things like that. But anyway, we're number 70, so it's Nfpa 70, and in our book you'll see every page has 70 dash something that's actually a page number, but all the pages say 70. So if I say page 200, it's going to be 70-200 or whatever. And this is the easy way to find information in the code book. The code book is designed, it's a user manual, and it's made for when you're looking for things, you look up certain key things and you go to the code book and find them. It's really not made to just start reading at the front and read all the way through. It's not like a very good novel or anything, and so it's not put together like that. We're going to talk about how the code book's put together, and that's going to help you find things in there. But it's put together different, and we'll show you how to use it. So we're going to start out the code book layout and how to find things. How to find answers. Code book is divided into the introduction and 9 chapters. Chapters 1 through 4 apply generally to all electrical installations. Chapter 1 is just general. Chapter 2 is wiring and protection. Chapter 3 is wiring methods and materials. Chapter 4 is equipment for general use. And we'll go over some of these a little bit more in detail as we go. Chapter 5 through 7 supplement 1 through 4, and so that's the only time you would change it. Most of our time is going to be in 1 through 4. That's where most of the meat in the code book is. Chapter 5 is special occupancies. Chapter 6, special equipment. 7, special conditions. Chapter 8 is communications, and it's standalone by itself. Doesn't really apply to anything else unless it specifically states it does. Chapter 9 is tables, and the code book is comprised of many, many tables, and we'll see as we go through there. One of the things that I'm going to ask you to do, that I advise you to do, is in your code book, in the back of your code book, there's several just blank pages. So what we say is on one of those blank pages, just leave it open, and we're just going to put, you can write tables at the top, and we're just going to put all the tables on that page. That way, if you're looking for something, you're not sure where to look, that's also a resource where you go back there and look and say, okay, well, hey, here's a table I'm looking for. Then on another one of those pages, we're going to ask you to write notes, and you may have 1 or 2 pages of notes depending on, how much of a note taker you are, and we'll put notes and different types of calculation and formulas, things that you need, things that there again make it as a resource to you. This is your code book. We always say this is your code book, and this is a way of sharpening your own knife. This is your knife, sharpen it up. Put whatever is in there and what makes sense to you. Chapter 9, all the tables. And then Annex. The Annex has many things in it. It also has a breakdown that shows different types of calculations out of the code book, and they're in there, and they're laid out, not really in a great way, but they're all in there. And the Annex also has Annex C, which is a table, and it has all the different types of conduit, say EMT, rigid conduit, flexible conduit, PVC conduit, and it's in there, and it's made up. It shows you if you have conductors all the same size. So if you have 4/0 wires, you can look and see how many 4/0 you can put in a 2-inch PVC or whatever, but it has all these broken down, so that's done for you. And that's Annex C. Also in the Annex, you have ADA, some basic requirements for ADA. ADA is not part of the National Electric Code. ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, but we're using it quite a bit, especially in apartments. Almost all apartments have some or all their apartments are, set up for ADA, and your receptacle and your switch heights are going to be different, and where you put receptacles on countertops will be different. And it has a couple of pages of pictures on that are helpful. Then last, you have the index. Index we're going to use quite a bit because the way we're going to find things in the code, the procedure we're going to use is we're going to look for keywords. We're going to look in the index for these keywords, try to find these keywords, and that's going to send us back in the code book to where we would need to be and get the answers that we're looking for. We're going to start out with the introduction. On the introduction, remember it was the introduction in 9 chapters. On the introduction, we're going to go through and mark some of the introduction up, and that way you'll have that done. The rest of the chapters I'm not going to mark up, but we will go through them, and then I'll show you how to find answers to some questions. But we're going to go ahead and mark this up. So when you hear whoosh, that means to mark, to take a highlighter and mark your code book. I highly recommend on marking with a highlighter, get you a yellow highlighter is the best, but on highlighting, only highlight keywords or maybe a sentence or parts of sentences. I highly recommend to not, to highlight whole paragraphs or half pages and stuff. I see that, and it's like having nothing because you just look at a sea of highlighter. But if you have a word or two, it pops out on the page when you look at that, and it comes back and helps you find things. So the introduction covers, first thing, the purpose of the code, Article 90.1. Also in our code book, we talked about pages, but the code book, electricians, we use articles. So in articles, that's what we're going to go with. I'll tell you pages at the start, but by the end, you'll be looking at articles. Article is how this code book is laid out per articles. Article 90.1 is introduction. I'm going to read it. A, practical safeguarding. Purpose of this code is the practical safeguarding of persons and property from hazards arising from the use of electricity. This code is not intended as a design specification or an instruction manual for untrained persons. I always like to add it's not great for trained persons because the way it's laid out, it's different, so it's not just straightforward on looking things up, and you'll see that as you go along. But the more you use it and the more you understand it, like going through this, the easier it will be to find answers. And so nanny, so that was the purpose, and then B is adequacy. This code contains provisions that are considered necessary for safety. Compliance, therefore, and proper maintenance result in installation that is essentially free from hazards, but not necessarily efficient, convenient, or adequate for good service or future expense of electrical use. So they're telling you if you build it, the code's a minimum. If you build it per this code, it will be safe. Things will be safe, and that's the main purpose of this code. Now, whether it'll work or not, maybe, maybe not. You have to know what your loads are and stuff and make sure that you are, whatever you're building and whatever you're putting in there will actually carry the load. All right, then 2 is the scope. 90.2 is the scope. And it's got, I'm only going to read A, covered. And there's a list of things. You can read through that. That's what all is covered. It's mainly premise wiring. And then B, not covered. Not covered, basically utilities and things like that, railroad cars and ships and things it doesn't cover. Cars, but it covers premise wiring, so things that you would build on site, and that's generally what it covers. The code arrangement is 90.3, code arrangement, and I'm not going to read through that because that's what we're going through right now, but you can highlight that and go back. It's the same thing we're talking about. It tells you how it's arranged and what's what in it. I'm going to go to 90.4, enforcement. This code is intended to be suitable for mandatory application by governmental bodies that exercise legal jurisdiction over electrical installations, including signaling and communication, and for use by insurance inspectors. That's kind of odd, insurance inspectors. The authority having jurisdiction for enforcement of this code has a responsibility for making interpretations of the rules and for deciding on the approval of equipment and materials and for granting special permission contemplated in a number of these rules. Goes on to say below, by special permission, the authority having jurisdiction may waive specific requirements in this code or permit alternate methods where it is assured that equivalent objectives can be established and maintain effective safety. So that's kind of what it says. So a couple of things in there, governmental bodies, it's made for use by inspectors, that's governmental bodies, third-party inspectors, and then insurance agents, insurance people. They have insurance agents that know a lot about the code. They have insurance agents that know as much as I do, easily, if not more. And so they'll come out, and we need to know these things because remember, we're putting this in for minimum safety. So if something happens, if they come out and look and say you had a problem, we want them to say, well, what you did was well within the code rules, and so you haven't violated any of these codes. And, we want to do that. We want to make sure that we stay within there. Then 90.5, mandatory rules, permissive rules, and explanatory rules. Mandatory rules. Mandatory rules in this code are those that identify actions that are specifically required or prohibited and characterized by the use of the term shall or shall not. So shall, you got to do it. Shall not, you can't do it. B, permissive rules. Permissive rules of this code are those that identify actions that are allowed but not required, are normally used to describe options or alternative methods, and are characterized by the use of the terms shall be permitted or shall not be required. Pretty self-explanatory there. And so so that's B. So C, explanatory materials. Explanatory materials such as references to other standards, references to related sections of this code, or information related to the code rule is included in the code in the form of informational notes. Such notes are informational only and are not enforceable as requirements of this code. So if it's an informational note, which is in the smaller writing, it's not enforceable. They're just giving you that as information that they think can help you, but it's not actually a code rule. It's just information. And then 90.6, formal interpretation. To promote uniformity of interpretation and application of this code, formal interpretation procedures have been established or found in any Nfpa regulations governing committee projects. So in other words, you think this is right, you think the inspector thinks that something else is right, you can go to the code panel, right now you have to write them, and it's not going to take an hour or a week, it's going to take months or longer, and they'll come back and tell you a formal interpretation. Okay, what you thought was right, or what he thought was right, or what neither one of you thought was right. But it has to go back to the code panels, and it's not a very fast process. Examination of equipment for safety, 90.7. For specific items of equipment and materials referred to in this code, examination of safety made under standard conditions provide a basis for approval. Well, the record is made generally available through promulgation by organizations properly equipped and qualified for experimental testing, inspection, or the run of goods of factories and service value determined through field inspections. This avoids the necessity for repetition of examination by different examiners, frequently with inadequate facilities for such work, and the confusion that would result from conflicting reports, suitability of devices and materials examined by a given purpose. So beside that in your code book, 90.7, you should write beside that in your code book, UL or ETL. So these are testing laboratories. What they're saying is most equipment, and if you look at your service panels or lights, a lot of different equipment you have has to be listed equipment, boxes, listed equipment. So they've been listed and tested by UL, ETL. There's a few other labs, but that's your main two. And so by that, the inspector doesn't need to relook at the panel and see if the panel's built properly. That was done at the factory, and that's taken care of through UL and ETL. So that's the purpose of that. And then wire planning, 90.8. Future expansion and convenience. Plans and specifications that provide ample space in raceways, spare raceways, additional spaces. Additional spaces allow for future increase in electric power and communication circuit. Distribution centers located in readily accessible locations provide convenience and safety of operation. So that, you know, if you're gonna, when you put things in, when you install them, depending on what you're doing, that's what I say, you need to know what you need to install in them. Most things like that we're working on, generally houses and apartments, everything that's in there is pretty much in there, except if they come back and add a pool or something, you would need to know that, or if they're going to add a machine shop on their house, or if they're going to add a pool or whatever in their apartment project, you would need to know that. Otherwise, you wouldn't have it planned for in there. What you don't know about, you don't need to, or you really can't plan for, because you might plan for, well, I'm planning for this size shop in the back of this person's house. They come back and build one 3 times the size or using 3 times the equipment. And of course, you didn't have that in there. So that's just, you know, the more information you have, the more you can do. Otherwise, they're just going to have to upgrade at a later date, which happens all the time. 90.9, units of measure. Units of measure. How many of you are familiar with the metric system? No, probably many of you are. In 1978, Jimmy Carter was president, and at that time, they decided the whole world, because I think the whole world other than us and I think Uruguay are on the metric system. So they made the metric system is our system. I think it still is. And so that's our actual, you know, that's our actual system. It's just never been used. I hope they don't put it into play for the next 10 years or so, because I really don't want to deal with it. But I remember at that time when they were coming out with it in the code, people were saying, well, what should we do? Should we use metric? Should we use American Standard? What should we use? So we'll talk about it, and it'll kind of tell us what they did. So 90.9, A, measurement systems of preference. For the purpose of this code, metric units of measurement are in accordance with the modernized metric system, known as the International System of Units, SI. If you're taking a test, that might be on there too. So then B, we're going to read dual systems of units. SI units shall appear first, and inch-pounds units shall immediately follow in parentheses. Conversion from inch-pounds to SI shall be based on hard conversions except as provided in 90.9C. It says you can do a soft conversion. So anyway, so you'll see in all your tables and things, it's going to be metric first, American Standard units at secondly. Whoever thought of that, somebody thought of that and said, why don't we just put metric first, put American inch-pounds next. Man, whoever thought of that was a genius, because we're still using it today, and that's been a long time. All right, so we're kind of done with the introduction, and we'll see. Like I say, anytime that you find answers and things in your book, I would say go ahead and mark them, and we'll go along as this series comes out. But chapter 1 is definitions. This article in the code book is actually important reading. It contains definitions as defined by the National Electric Code. And so this is one I say, this is important reading, because definitions is one of the articles you can actually read, because it's just like a dictionary. You know, here's the word, here's the definition, here's the word, here's the definition. So if you really want to learn a lot about the code, this is a good place to do. There's a lot of things in definitions. As the code books keep evolving. They keep putting more and more things into definitions, and moving them from other places into definitions. So if you're looking for something to read and you really want to learn a lot, that's a good place. The code is its own language. So the code has definitions because the language in the code is different than it is for just others in general. And so, like I'm looking on page 32, Article 100 definitions, and I'm on the bottom right-hand side, and it says bathroom, an area including a sink or basin with one or more of the following: a toilet, a urinal, a tub, a shower, a bidet, or similar plumbing fixtures. So it's real specific about what a bathroom is. So if it has a sink and any one of these other things is considered a bathroom. Why is that important? Because for us, then that means it has to have that 20 amp circuit running through there just for receptacles, and unless you use an exception. And so we'll look at maybe one more thing on here. Another thing in definitions, I'm on page 34, bottom left-hand side, continuous load. What do you think of when you think continuous? When I think continuous, me personally, that means to just keep going and going and going, just keep going. But continuous load in the code has a different meaning. A load where the maximum current is expected to continue for 3 hours or more. So you see, definitions in the code book aren't necessarily just common sense definitions. So that's why it's important to know what they are. The other thing in Chapter 1, it says Article 110 contains requirements for electrical installations, has a lot about lugs and connections and things like that. So pretty good. It's a pretty small article, but a lot of stuff in it. Chapter 2, wiring and protection. Man, Chapter 2, we're going to be in it a lot because a lot of things that apply to us are in Chapter 2, and just so much in Chapter 2, wiring protection for us. In residential, all of your spacing and everything is in Article 210, 210, and 210.52, just tons and tons of stuff in there. Also, it has you have Article 240, which is overcurrent protection, which overcurrent protection is generic OCP. Overcurrent protection is generic for breaker or fuse. Just means we don't care if you use a breaker or a fuse, but you have to protect the wire. You have also Article 230, which is services, big deal in there. You're definitely going to use that a lot. You have Article 250, which is grounding, which a lot of people would like to say Article 250 grounding is the most important article in the code. I think they're all the same, but a lot of people believe that because it's grounding and bonding, and that's for your protection. So it is real important, and it's a pretty big chapter, so there's a lot in there. It also you have Article 220, calculating circuits and feeders and services, has everything on how to calculate from a shed to a 100-story building. There's everything in there how to calculate it. And it also has surge protection in there, which is going to be an important thing for us coming up. Chapter 3, wiring methods and material. So wiring methods and material. So Chapter 3, it has quite a few tables in it. We're going to use has ampacity tables in it, Article 310.16. It has also general requirements for wiring methods, materials, raceways, types they are. It has a section in there like you'll see NM cable, which is Romex, is in there, Article 334. So for every specific type of these types of material, cables, they have their own little section, tells you everything what you can and can't do, how you have to install them, where you can use them, where you can't use them. So Chapter 3's got a lot of stuff in it. Material types, raceways. It has another big table in there, 300.5, minimum cover, and then has, which is minimum cover for in the ground, has minimum cover boxes, box fill, conductor and cable types, uses and gutters and more. So a lot in it. Chapter 4 is equipment for general use. So this is your equipment you would use: heaters, air conditioners, that sort of thing. It starts off with flexible cords and cables, light fixtures. It tells you how to build a light fixture in there. Not that we'll be building a light fixture, but remember, this code book is also used by manufacturers. They're using it just like us, so that's how they get the standards to build light fixtures and air conditioning units and things like that. Panel boards, switchboards, receptacles, switchboards, switch gear. Switch gear is like a panel but just bigger. Panel boxes, lighting systems, electrical heating equipment, motors. It has motors in there. Whole section on that, Article 430. Air conditioning, refrigeration, appliances, Article 422. Transformers are Article 450 and more, so a lot in all these chapters. But first 4 chapters, remember, that's all our basic stuff. Chapter 5 through 7 supplement or modifies chapter 1 through 4. Chapter 5, special occupancies. So you got hazardous locations, class 1, 2, 3, aircraft hangars, gas dispensers, bulk storage, spraying and dipping, stuff that we usually don't use. Healthcare facilities, don't really deal with that. Assembly occupancies, 100 people or more. A lot of us deal with that, especially in clubhouses, if we're doing clubhouses, and or if we're doing apartments, they have, their type of clubhouse or whatever. They're big meeting rooms in for apartment areas. A lot of the times that applies in there, and that's how you wire it. You might probably have to use MC cable because it has a higher fire rating. Has different things, theaters and such, control system, amusement parks, carnivals, motion pictures, agricultural buildings, mobile homes. We got to know a little bit about that. RV parks, park trailer. A park trailer is basically, if you know what a tiny house is, it's basically that. A park trailer is something that's sitting in a park, but it's not really movable. Looks like a tiny house kind of deal. Floating buildings. And then another big one is Article 590, temporary installations. Need to know about that because we do a lot of temporary. It's about everything that we go to. You're an electrician, they want you to get temporary power. So for a house, usually it's just a T-pole. Hopefully it's hooked up, it's good. If not, sometimes you gotta have a generator. And then if you're doing multifamily, it's gonna be different. It's probably gonna be a lot bigger temporary generally. If it's a wrap or a podium type, if it's a bigger one, you're gonna have to put temporary throughout the building. So it's gonna be important to us. Chapter 6, special equipment. Not a whole lot of stuff on here really applies to us. Electric signs, not really. Manufacturing system, office furniture, cranes and hoists, elevators and such. Elevators, if you're doing multifamily, you're going to deal with elevators. Some houses have elevators, so it's got its own little section. Vehicle charging systems, electrical vehicle, those are becoming more and more popular. If you're not dealing with them now, you will be, because everybody sells an electric car. Some of them even sell an electric truck. And so that type of information. It goes on in chapter 6. Many things, sensitive electronic pipe organs. I'm sure a lot of you guys are doing pipe organs, right? I think last time I was on the code panel, there's like one guy in the United States that does pipe organs. Who knew it? And reading on down, we get down here, electric irrigation machines, swimming pools, Article 680. Have to know a little bit about that. We generally aren't actually wiring the actual pool, but we're getting power to pools all the time in houses and apartments for sure. Fountains, a little bit of. Artificial bodies of water, not that much. Solar photovoltaic. Solar systems, yeah, those are becoming popular too, so we're going to go over a little bit on that. More and more keeps getting put in there because more and more is going that way. There's, solar is really, it's been a slow rise, but there's a lot of it. It's even used by utilities and things like that. Wind electric systems, not that much. Fuel cells. Fire pumps, if you're doing a bigger multifamily, you're doing podiums and wraps and multi-use buildings, fire pumps, you're definitely going to run into that. And so fire pumps are a big thing that we're going to need to. But those are special equipment. And they're treated a special way. A fire pump, usually has its own service. Chapter 7 is special conditions, legally required systems. So you have 3 different types in Chapter 7 special conditions. You have emergency system. Emergency system would be like a hospital or intensive care unit or something like that. So if it were to go off, somebody could potentially have harm or die. So it's really regulated. Then the next one is legally required standby systems. That's usually on fire stations and water stations, sewage stations, stuff like that. So if the power goes off there, you're not going to die, but it's going to make life rough on you. And so maybe a little bit of dealing with that depending on, I know that some apartments and stuff actually have pumps and things that may require that. Then we deal a lot with optional standby systems, which means, hey, I'm at my house or I'm in my apartment, I just want a generator. And so that's optional. And it has the least restrictive rules on it, because if it doesn't work, you're just going to be without lights and without power. It's not really going to be detrimental to someone's life or ability to operate. Power system circuits operating 50 volts or less. We're not doing a lot of that, but those are becoming more and more popular, and I say us doing that. Lights are getting more and more efficient, and they have lights that can't operate less than that they have for years, but now they just work better. Different class circuits, fire alarm systems. Some of us may be doing that, but not a whole lot of us. But there again, that's something that I think in the near future is something that we'd probably like to pick up and would be a complement to wiring and our what we do as far as power wiring. Optical fiber cables and raceways. Then 8, communication systems. Communication systems not subject to Chapter 1 through 7, except where specifically referenced in Chapter 8. So here we are, and we're down to Chapter 9. So tables. Table 4, conduit dimensions and area of conduit. Table 5, dimensions of insulated conductor and fixture wires. Table 8. Table 8 we're definitely going to use later on in this program. Conductor properties, dimensions of bare wire, use of this table for voltage drop formulas, because it tells you the circular mill areas, which is going to be important when we're doing voltage drop calculations. Annex A through J is reference material. Annex C is that table with conductors all the same size in a conduit. If they're all the same size, they've sized these conduits for you. So if you have all of one size of conductor, say like number 12, number 10, number 4, 4/0, 500, you can look in that. If you have 4 500s, you can look in there and see what size conduit you need if you're using. It has different tables for PVC and EMT and rigid, different type. Annex D is example of calculations. And then index. Like I said, we're going to use that index a lot, because what we're going to do is we're going to look for keywords. We're going to look in the index. It's in the back of the book. We're going to come back and find them. Another thing I'd like to talk about is, if you come to my classes, or basically probably anybody's classes, but us for sure, we use tabs. We tab our code books. I used ones from a guy called Tom Henry, and it has tabs you don't need. Doesn't have some tabs you need. There are some that have a bunch of tabs. I've seen some where they have a tab for every chapter, and to me that's too many, because tabs will help you find your way around. But if you have a tab for every chapter, it's like not having a tab. But tabs are helpful, and to help you, find your way through the code book. It's an easy and quick way to do it. So I would say it's probably a good thing to invest in some tabs. If you don't have code book and tabs, definitely going to be worth your while. You'll definitely get your use out of it.